In CIST 2531, Chapter 9, we're going to be looking at working with different types of text. We'll also be working with Illustrator. So you want to make sure that you have Illustrator downloaded with your Creative Cloud subscription. So first, we're going to start off working with Photoshop. We're going to be looking at converting layer styles to editable artwork. So we're going to start off by using PS 9-1 file. So let me open this up here. Okay, so we have our text sliced. We have two backgrounds. We have a text background and a background of the black. So uh, this text layer has been rasterized. So it has been made into an image. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this so we can work with it. So if we use the text tool, okay, so we're creating a new layer. So we're not being able to edit that layer using our text tool. So we're going to have to look at different ways to work with this layer. First, we'll make sure that we have the layer selected. So let's go up to select. And then here we're going to load the selection. Now in the load selection dialog box, we have some different options in here. So we got our document, channel, where we want to invert, and then some different operations. So in this case, we're going to choose the channel. We're going to choose diagonal cut. We're going to click OK. Now we'll see that now we have a selection that has been loaded. Now to break this text up or anything, we can use the move tool, and we can simply just drag this down, and this is going to create a slice of the text. So it's going to be just a simple way where we can uh, still edit the text after it's been rasterized. All right, so I'm going to undo this. And let me deselect. All right, so now we're going to look at how this works when we have like a layer style applied to it. So we're going to look at a bevel and emboss. So I'm going to apply bevel and emboss to my text. Let's set it in here. I'm going to make sure it's set to inner bevel, chisel hard. My depth, I'm going to set to 120. Direction is up. Size is 42. Angle is going to be 45. Use global light. Altitude is set to 30. Now the glass contour, we'll look at this. So this is the curves to our shading. Now we have a drop down menu that will give us a visual representation of the glass contour. As you'll see in this example in your book, it wants you to choose this option here. Now if you leave your mouse pointer hovering over, it will show you the name of this. So this one is the ring double. Now I can choose from this list. I can also click on the actual thumbnail. This will bring up my contour editor dialog box. I do have some presets. So in here I can come and choose a specific one. So this sometimes is a lot quicker to do it this way rather than waiting for Photoshop to pop up the name of the uh, glass contour. So in this case, we're going to use the ring double. Make sure the anti-alias is clicked. We'll set this to the opacity on highlight mode to 72. And the shadow mode will be set to 50. Okay, so we now have our bevel and emboss applied. So once again, we're going to go up to select, and we're going to load our selection of our diagonal cut. Now you'll see this that when we move this down, I'm just going to smooth this straight down just a little bit. You'll see that when we have a layer style applied, you'll notice now it's been applied to the edges of this slice as it was everywhere else already. So when we undo this, You see that the bevel emboss ends have not been applied. But when we do move this, now the bevel emboss has been applied to that. So when you run into this situation, so this is not really that bad. It looks pretty good actually, but there may be times that you don't want to use that effect. So layer styles, an issue with those is they cannot be um, edited or masked very well. So we're going to have to convert this layer style to artwork. So let's go back and undo this, and we'll deselect. So what we'll do here is we're going to convert this layer style into its own layer. So we'll go up to layer, come down to layer style, and in here we're going to choose to create layers. Now you notice there's not been any change in here, but we do have over here, we've got a couple layers that's being created that are now clipped into our image. So instead of having a layer style, the layer styles have now been made into their own layers and now have been clipped into our original step. Now, when you're working through this chapter, this next step will have you saving. I'm not going to save it. Instead, I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to come down to History. And in here, I am going to take a snapshot. So this is a place I can quickly reload back to this point in time. Okay, so now we're going to look at how to make this and edit these layers. So I'm going to right click on the layer. That's the highlight layer. And I'm going to tell it to release the clipping mask. Okay, so when I release the clipping mask, this is the um, image I get. So now we see that the bevel emboss, all these clipping mask has been released. It's no longer clipped into our text layer. So we'll see how that changes. We're going to undo all this and go back to where they're clipped in. So now both of them are clipped in. All right, so once again, now let's look at this when we load the selection. And then when we move this, before we do that, we're going to select the correct layers. And this will be something that you may have to play with um, a few times. All right, so now I've got my layers sliced up. Um, and then so I have the text layer selected. The other layers are still clipped into that. And see, it gives us a clean line with this now. So now we're going to look at using Illustrator for our text, because there are some limitations that you'll have in Photoshop when working with text. One of those will be rounded corners. So in Illustrator, I'm going to open up PS92. So I've got the word plastic in here. Now you're going to save this file as rounded corners. So in here, I'm going to go to Illustrator. I'm going to go to View, and then I'm going to come down to Hide Edges. Or I can use a keyboard shortcut of Control H. So now I'm going to come back up again. We're going to make some more changes. So I'm going to choose the effect menus. I'm going to first come down to the stylized, and in here I'm going to choose to round the corners. Now in this dialog box, I'm going to put 0, 1, which I've already done. I'm going to click OK, and you'll see not much changes here. But when I go to Object and Expand Appearances, I don't think I hit OK. One second. Let me. I'm not sure why that's not. There we go. Okay, so let's start this project back over again because something didn't work right there. Okay, so we've opened this back up. We're going to select all, which is the step I missed. We'll come to View and then Hide Edges. Then I'm going to click Effect, go to Stylize, Round Corners, choose point 1. So now we see the changes in the corners here. So that's one of the things you can do with Illustrator that you really can't do with Photoshop. You have a lot more control because you're working with shapes in Illustrator. Now this is something that it works well with Photoshop, and as you get to use Illustrator more and more, you will become more proficient at it and become a very helpful tool when working with Photoshop. So now I'm going to go to Object and Expand Appearances. All right, let's go to Edit and Copy, and we'll show you how this works with Photoshop. So let's go back into Photoshop now, and I'm going to open up PS 9-3. So now I've got the same plastic here, but I'm going to take what I had in Illustrator and paste into Photoshop. So in here, I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to choose Paste. Now I've got some different options here of how to paste this. I'm going to choose to paste this as pixels. I'm going to click OK. See, I do have a layer here now that's been pasted in. Its own layer. It's got the bounding box already around it. So we'll click Enter. Now we're going to work on the color of this. So we're going to create a plastic looking text in Photoshop. So I'm going to come down to my foreground color. And I'm going to set the RGB, the red to 128, the green to 128, and finally the blue to 128. And click OK. Now, with this, I want to make sure that I go ahead and lock the transparent pixels. All right, so that when I use the fill options to fill these with the foreground color, it's only going to be applied on the pixels that have some type of color to it. So we're going to go to Edit and Fill. We're going to choose to fill the foreground color. Click OK. At this point, we would name the layer. I'm going to skip over that. Actually, we'll name it Pillow Boss. All right, so now we're going to go to looking at layer styles. So we're going to go to, on our menu, go to Layer, Layer Styles, and we're going to choose Bevel and Emboss. Now in here, we're going to set some settings on the Bevel and Emboss. First, we're going to change this to Pillow Emboss. Our technique will be Smooth. Our depth will be set at 100. Direction is up. Size at 98 pixels. And we're going to soften by 7 pixels. Our angle will be 30. We will use global light, and our altitude will be 30. Our gloss contour, we're going to change to our linear. We'll check the anti-alias and I'll turn it off. Screen will be set to 75 and multiply at 75. Now we'll see that when we do this, we have this effect here to where we have this behind our plastic. It's not very, not something that's going to work with our final project that we're working on. So we're going to have to isolate and this text and have that shadow disappear. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on Control on the keyboard, and we're going to click on the thumbnail. So we're making a selection, and we're going to go to Edit and Copy Merged. So what this does, this copies your artwork that you have selected like it was all merged and the image was flattened. So now we're going to take that and we're going to create another layer with it. So we're going to edit and we're going to paste this. We'll see that we have a new layer created. And we're going to name this layer Plastic Text. We will hide the pillow emboss layer. So now we've applied the pillow emboss layer style to this text. It's now in one layer. So we got rid of the shadow and everything. So now we're going to apply a solid color to this. So once again, we'll go to Layer. We'll go to New Fill Layer. And then here we're going to choose Solid Color. Now you see in the New Layer dialog box, we have a way to name this here. So we'll name it Gold. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose the Use Previous Layer to create Clip It Mask. So we're going to create a layer, and we're going to go ahead and clip it into the word plastic. So we'll make sure that that is checked and click OK. This will bring up our color picker. So in here, we're going to set our reds to 255, our greens to 234, and finally our blues to 94. So this gives us this goldish look. We're going to click OK. Now we're going to work with some blending modes. Blending modes affects the way the layers interact with each other. So we'll come over to our layers panel and we'll see we have normal. And you can get a preview of how different blending modes will affect your image when you apply that blending mode. So in this case, we're going to choose soft light. Now we're going to add a adjustment layer, fill adjustment layer. We see that we have that on our option down here to create a new fill or adjustment layer. Now in this case, we're going to hold down our Alt key, hold down our right mouse button, and we're going to click on Hue and Saturation. So this is going to bring up our new layer dialog box with the hue and saturation. In here, we're going to also make sure that we use the previous layer to create the clipping mask. So we're going to click OK. We'll see that we have our hue and saturation settings appear here. We have a new layer that's clipped into our gold. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change the saturation slider to positive 50. Or you can just type in the dialog box to get to 50. So now we have more of a plastic gold look into our image. By using this with the uh, soft light, the blending options, it does create this more vibrant color. Now you want to see how these look without it. For example, if I was to change this back to normal, so it's got that kind of bland uh, plastic look or plastic goldish text versus how it looks here. So now with using soft light, it does give it more of a rounded plastic look. All right, so we'll make sure next that we got the hue and saturation layer this layer targeted on our layers panel. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work with some filter galleries. We're going to um, apply a plastic wrap filter. So first, let's go ahead and select all. And we'll click Edit on the menu bar, and we're going to do the copy merged again. Then we'll do Edit Paste. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to name this Plastic Wrap. And we're going to hide all these other layers. Everything except for our background layer and the plastic wrap. Now, the couple things here when we get into the plastic wrap, we're going to look at first to walk through this way it's designed in your book. We'll select the rectangular marquee tool. We're going to go up in the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to select everything through the S. So when we do this, we're going to apply the plastic wrap filter to this area. So what we're going to do now is go to Filter, and then come down to Filter Gallery. Now, Filter Gallery is going to open this dialog box where it's got a lot of different options. I've already selected the plastic wrap, but you can see how these different filters will affect your image. It gives you a live preview. So I'm going to choose plastic wrap. You do have some options over here, things that you can change if you need to adjust the settings of this. So we can adjust this. The highlight strength is 15. You can see how that changes this highlight behind this. So we're going to set that back to 15. Our detail will change and see how this affects the image, the way it looks. We'll set it back to 8. And then the smoothness. So adjusting the slider, the smoothness, you'll see how the changes in those settings affects the way your image looks. We're going to set that back to 7. And click OK. Now you'll see that we've only now have it applied to half of our text because we've only applied it to what has been selected. So how do we get it to the other side? Getting to the other side is very easy. So we're going to go to Select and choose Inverse, or we could do the Shift Control I. And then Filter, and then you'll see at the top we have Filter Gallery. So that's going to apply our last selected filter. So we'll click Filter Gallery, and now it's been applied to the other side. Notice that both of these have the highlight behind them. That is why we did it this way. If we had just applied the plastic to the entire word, so we apply the plastic filter, the plastic wrap to everything, you'll see that it's been put in the middle. Okay, so we didn't want that effect. We wanted the highlight here to be applied to both sides of this word. So once again, since I'm going to go back through this, we're going to select plastic, come in, filter on the menu bar, filter gallery. Settings are the same. We've got plastic wrap selected. To apply it to the other side, we'll select inverse filter, filter gallery. And now we've applied that to both sides of our image. And it didn't do it right that time. So let's go back and undo this. So we'll highlight strength 15, details 8, smoothness at 7. Select the inverse. It's the way I have it selected. Where I have just a little bit of the S selected. So now we're back to where we should be. Okay, so because of the way my selection was, where I had just this area of the bevel emboss of the plastic of the S selected, it was throwing off my selection. So this is something that's not an exact science. You do have to adjust and make sure that your selections are correct as well on these. All right, so next we're going to make another selection of this. So we're going to hold Control, and we're going to click on the thumbnail of the pillow emboss layer. So we now have that pixels have been loaded as selection. All right, so now we're going to hold down Alt, and we're going to add a layer mask to this. Now, next we're going to invert this layer mask. So we're going to use Control-I to invert the layer mask, which gives us now our final image for the plastic. So we've taken our text, took it into Illustrator, rounded the edges, brought it back into Photoshop. I brought it into Photoshop and applied multiple settings, multiple adjustment layers, and filters to get this plastic look to our text. All right, some situations though you'll run into where like a this fill, maybe something that you need to adjust. So we're going to look at it on this. So if I adjust this fill here, you'll see that I'm adjusting the brightness of this. I'm adjusting what was in there. All right, so you may have to adjust that periodically to get your image to look exactly the right. Now, if you go to 0 with it, your image is going to be disappear completely. We're also going to look at now applying a recessed text effect. So I'm going to close the plastic. And here I am going to open up 9.4. So I want to load a selection. So I've got the recessed red, recessed white, my gray metal layer. So I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard, and I'm going to click the thumbnail of the recessed red. So now I've made a selection, loaded the selection of this. So I'm going to take this now and I'm going to expand this selection out. So I'm going to come up first to select, and then down to modify, and then expand. So in here, I'm going to choose to expand this by 20 pixels. So you'll see now the selection I've loaded has now been expanded by 20 pixels. So I'm going to now go to my white layer, and I'm going to fill this with white. So I want to make sure I don't deselect. I'm going to come to Edit, Fill. I'm going to choose what content. I'm going to choose white. Click OK. So now I've filled that selection that I loaded with the color of white. Now, once again, I'm going to expand this even further. So I'm going to go to my select, and I'm going to go to modify and expand. Here, I'm going to expand it by 14 more pixels. We'll click OK. You'll see that it's been expanded some more. And now I'm going to the gray metal layer. Here, I'll go to Edit, Copy. And then I'm going to paste this as a new layer. So I'm going to paste. I have a new layer created that I'm going to name Gray Metal Inner Shadow. Now, the reason I give these names is because it's easier for me to keep track of what layer I am working on if a layer has a meaningful name. So now that I've created this new layer, I'm going to give it a layer style. And I'm going to add the inner shadow layer style. So my blend mode is going to be set to multiply. My opacity will be set to 63%. The angle will be 33%. I will uncheck the use global light. My distance will be 6 pixels. Choke will be 28%. And my size will be 21 pixels. My contour is set. And then I'm going to click OK. So now you see that we've added this inner shadow effect. So it makes it look like it's kind of set back from the gray metal that surrounds it. It's kind of pushed in. So we're going to add some more effects here. So we're going to go to the recessed white. And we're going to add a bevel and emboss style that's going to be applied to this white layer. Now our settings for the bevel and emboss styles, we're going to set this to inner bevel. The technique will be chisel hard. And you'll see how these effects take place as we set the settings, how they change the way our layer styles look. Our depth will be set to 178 pixels percentage. Excuse me. Direction is up. Size is 9 pixels. The softness will be set to 0. Our angle will set to -5. We'll uncheck the use global light. Altitude will set to 37. Glass contour is okay. Anti-alias is fine. Our screen opacity will be set to 50. Sorry, our highlight mode. Our shadow mode will be set to 64. And so now we went in and added the bevel emboss layer style to the white recessed layer. So what this does, it kind of creates that bridge between the layer on top, the red layer text, and the gray metal inner shadow layer. So next we're going to target the recessed red layer. And on this one, we're going to add a inner shadow layer style. Our blend mode will be set to multiply. Our opacity is 63%. Our angle will be set to 30%. We will use global light. Our distance set to 6 pixels. The choke will be set to 17%. And our size set to 8 pixels. So we see how our image looks now. So I want you to pay attention to this, that the white embossed text, the rounded edge of that's not very smooth. So this may be something that you take into Illustrator if you need to clean this up. Use the offset path command. Also wanted to show you how the blend modes change the way this looks. As you can see, when we work through this, you can get different. Now, it's not very noticeable with this, but you do see some slight changes around the edges as you go through the different blend modes. So we'll click OK. So now we've used different layer styles here to produce this effect. So we've got the recessed text effect completed. The next step we're going to look at is we're going to create a complex recessed effect, type effect. So we're going to open up 9-5. This will give us our Jazz 2096 file. You'll notice that everything is cut off right now. So as we cut these on, we can see how this effect is built. All right, so right now, all I have is the same text, smaller as it goes up. This artwork was created in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to be doing some options to this to make it look a lot better. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change our foreground color. We're going to change it all to 128, the RGB. Okay, so this is going to be our neutral gray. We're going to hide the orange and red layers. We'll come back to those. We're going to first target our blue layer, and we're going to fill this with our foreground color. So we're going to fill this with the neutral gray. So notice that all of the layers already have the transparent pixels are locked. So you don't have to worry about filling in all of the other pixels that are not got color in them when you use the fill option. All right, still working on the blue layer. Now we're going to apply a bevel and emboss style. We're going to set the style to inner bevel. The technique will be chisel hard. The depth will be 100%. The direction is up. The size will be 100 pixels. Our softness will be set to 0. Our angle will be 45%. We will use global lighting. Our altitude will be 30. And we'll set the shadow mode opacity to 50%. The highlight mode will also be at 50%. So go click OK. Now we're going to move into the green layer. So when we select the green layer, first thing we're going to do is, once again, we're going to fill this with our neutral gray, our foreground color. Now we're going to use layer styles to differentiate between these different types of layers. So we'll give it the more recessed or 3D type look. So we're going to add an inner shadow style. We'll set the blend mode to multiply. The opacity we'll set to 75%. The angle is set to 45. We will use the global light. Our distance we will set to 11. The choke to 14. And the size to 16. So we click OK. So now we've used this to create indentions to the interior of the object. So now we're ready to move on to the orange layer. Once again, we're going to fill this with the neutral gray, our foreground color. And by using more blending options, we can change the way this looks. So we're going to use the bevel and emboss. The style is going to be inner bevel. We're going to have this as chisel hard. The size we're going to set to 9. Now in this, we're going to use the ring. So I'm going to click on this and choose the preset of ring. Cut on the anti-alias. And in my highlight mode and shadow mode, both the opacities should be 50%. So we're ready to move on to the red layer. Now this in itself is a very good looking logo for the Jazz 2096. So we're going to check this up a little bit. So we're going to, once again, fill this with neutral gray, our foreground color. Make sure you have the red layer selected. And here we're going to add an inner shadow. Our options are going to be set to multiply, 75% opacity, 45% for our angle. Use global light's going to be checked. Our distance we'll set at 8 pixels. The choke at 0%. And our size at 9 pixels. So at this point, we've taken our different layers and we've used those to build a recessed, complex image. So like, for example, if I hide the red layer, you see that it has taken off what we look like we pushed further and further into the image. All right, so let's create a new filler adjustment layer. And we're going to choose solid color. So we see we have a new layer. It's all been right now chosen as our neutral gray, our foreground color. So we're going to change the red in this to 199, our green to 75, and 195 for our blue. And we'll click OK. So now we're going to clip this into our red layer. So we'll right click on the layer and choose Create Clipping Mask. So now we've taken that and pushed this into only the red layer. So let's double click the bevel and emboss layer on the orange layer. So we're going to open this back up. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the opacity on our highlight mode to 80%. You see the difference that takes place from 50 to 80. So sometimes, you want to go back and play with your settings. Even the smallest little bit of change can affect the way your image looks. All right, so let's change our foreground color now. We're going to change it to 210 for red, 210 for green, and 210 for blue. So we're going to come down to the blue layer. And we're going to fill this blue layer with our new foreground color. To give it a different look here. So you're not having that same gray throughout the entire image. So we use multiple layer styles to create this complex, recessed artwork. Now you can also use images as in your text to give it a compelling look. So we'll start like looking at 9-6. So we see we have our text here. We have some layers that are hitting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first turn on the wave layer and I'm gonna clip this into the text. So you see it gives it this look for the image. Let me release that clipping mask and you see the image here, the wave. And now it's been clipped into that. If I hold down Control I and invert this, so now it's going to give me a new look. So using the same image, just by inverting the image, I can change the way it looks when it's clipped into the mask. Also by changing the blending mode. You can see when I mouse over these different blending mode options, it changes the way this image looks. On this clipping mask. And also the type of texture. So we'll look at the wood layer here. So let's clip this in. So we've got the wood layer. It's shiny because of the bevel and emboss layer effect that's been applied. So we're going to work on this bevel and emboss in here. So let's change the gloss contour. We'll change it to linear and see how it changes the way the image looks. And you can look at the different ones, different options you have for these, and how it would change those. All right, so let's hide the wood, and we'll look at the granite. So it gives us more of an ancient Rome look. It's like it's cut out of granite, like it's out of stone. We can change, once again, just changing the blending modes. We'll change the way this looks. So we can make it more of a darker looking image by changing the blending mode. And also we can use these to work together. So I've activated the wood layer. Now I'm going to change the blending mode on this to overlay. So it still gives it that rock look, that granite look. But now it's got a more of a darker, almost like a bronze type rock look. But even changing that. So if I invert this by holding Control I, you'll see that now it's going to give it a bluish look. So I can use different images to change the way another image looks by using the clipping mask, different overlay settings, and using them in combinations and inverting the images. Now this also works not only for just patterns, but also for images itself. So let's look at 9.7. This gives our plastic type. We'll see that we have different images. We have flowers. We have this geometry image, mountains, and then we have an abstract blue. So with this one, I'm going to change this blending mode to overlay. So just by changing the blending mode on this and clipping this in, so you see I've got this, it looks almost like a waterish effect on the plastic, almost like it has water pouring over it. Some of the mountains. So when I clip these into the plastic, you see that it does have the image in here. So now I can use this to create effects. And this is something like this. For example, if I wanted to do the flowers as well, I can move these. Okay, so I'm not restricted by doing just one image and clipping it into my text. I can create multiple, um, use multiple images. If I wanted to, I could use this in each word. So I'm going to do that. Back where it goes. Same with the geometry. So let me clip this into here. So it gives it a nice, you know, pretty cool effect. I can change blending modes. You can see how it changes the way the text looks. Yeah, using clipping mask, blending modes really can affect the way your image looks. Now, this next image we're going to look at is going to be 9:9 and 9:8. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this guy playing the saxophone and we're going to put him into that jazz logo that we have here on 9:8. So let me close the rest of these out. So we're going to use this to create a really visually appealing effect with this. So in 9:9, I'm going to select all of this and I'm going to copy. Then I'm done with this file. So at this point, I can close it. So in 9:8, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all of these layers except for my blue layer. Make sure it's targeted. And I'm going to paste that image. So I'm going to edit, paste. Then I'm going to create a clipping mask and clip it into the blue layer. Now I'm going to do this with each one of these. So I'm going to turn on the green layer, select it. I'm going to then paste the image into the green layer and then clip it into the green layer. Now what I'm going to do, some of these now, is I'm going to change the blending modes. So for this one here, I'm going to change to hard light. So now I've got this really nice effect that's being applied. And I'm going to target the orange. Once again, I'm going to paste this image into this and clip it in. Changing the blending mode. So once again, clip and paste into the red, or paste and clip into the red. So now I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So I'm going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. I'm going to set its blending mode to overlay. And I'm going to adjust the lightness to 16 to give me my final image. So once again, using multiple layers, multiple times you paste something in, changing blending modes can give you this effect. So if I go back in and say I didn't paste this guy into all of these effects or into these layers, you'll see the way it looks once I've placed this in. And notice it's just on the top. But by placing him in there and changing the blending modes, it built that effect out. to give us this final image for our Photoshop file.